My name is Hilda, and I am 60 years old, but after everything that has happened, I feel 100. 3 days ago, my son Damien and his wife Melissa took my husband Henry and me to the mountains and pushed us off a 90-foot cliff. As I fell, the cold wind tore the scream from my throat, and the last thing I heard before darkness swallowed me was Henry's broken whisper telling me, "Hilda, don't move, play dead." Even now, those words echo inside me because they saved my life, but they also mark the moment I realized that evil can live inside the people you raise with your own hands. Yet this story does not begin with a cliff. No, it begins decades earlier when our family still felt whole and peaceful, when the smell of coffee in the mornings and Henry's sawdust-stained clothes made our small suburban home feel like the safest place on earth. I taught at the local elementary school, returning every afternoon with little stories from the classroom, while Henry shaped simple pieces of wood into beautiful furniture that people admired and treasured. We were not rich, but we were happy. Our days were stitched together with routines, laughter, and quiet dreams for the future. Our 2 sons, Richard and Damien, were the heart of our home. Richard, our firstborn, was sunlight, bright, warm, and full of promise. He helped his father in the workshop, checked on me when I looked tired, and talked endlessly about becoming an engineer. Damien was quieter, always watching, always thinking, standing slightly apart from the noise of family life. I told myself he would open up one day, that he simply saw the world differently, and I loved him with the same fierce devotion with which I loved Richard. Sundays were our family's sacred ritual. Church in the morning, laughter in the kitchen, and dinner around the oak table Henry carved years ago. Richard talked about school, plans, hopes. Damien listened silently, rarely lifting his eyes. I never imagined that silence could one day turn into something dangerous. Evenings were gentle. Henry and I would walk the trail around our town, dreaming about retirement, travel, and the grandchildren we hoped to spoil one day. I thought those walks were shaping the peaceful old age we would enjoy together. I never imagined they were preparing our bodies for the walk that would one day nearly kill us. Everything changed the year Richard turned 20. I started hearing arguments behind closed doors, harsh whispers, tension that floated through the hallways like smoke. Damien's expression grew sharper, colder, but I was a mother who wanted to believe the best, so I forced myself to call it normal sibling conflict. Then one October night, Richard didn't come home. We waited hours, calling neighbors, pacing the floor, praying the phone would ring with something other than dread. At dawn, Henry returned with the neighbors and told me that Richard had been found at the bottom of the river gorge. The police said it was an accident, just a tragic slip in the dark. I accepted it because the truth was too painful to consider, too monstrous to imagine. At the funeral, I cried until my body shook, while Damien stood beside me strangely calm, his face unreadable. I convinced myself that grief looks different on everyone, but some part of me, small, frightened, buried, knew something was wrong. Life moved on in fragments. Damien softened, became helpful, gentle, even affectionate. He brought me tea when I cried, fixed things around the house, spent more time at Henry's side in the workshop. I thought he was trying to fill the emptiness Richard left behind, and for years I chose to see this as healing. Later he married Melissa, a sweet-faced girl from a nearby town who called me mom and hugged me like she truly cared. They had 2 beautiful children, and for a while life felt whole again. But happiness built on lies eventually cracks. 6 months ago, Damien came to us with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes and suggested that we update our will. He talked about responsibility, about planning for the future, about how much he and Melissa loved us. At the time it seemed innocent. I didn't know then that this was the first thread in a web he had been spinning for years. I didn't know that behind every smile, every visit, every affectionate gesture, there was a plan. Slow, deliberate, and cruel. A plan that would end with Henry whispering for me to play dead, and with me finally learning the truth about what really happened the night Richard died. For weeks after Damien suggested updating our will, something inside me refused to settle. It was like a soft tapping inside my chest, quiet, persistent, asking me to look closer at the son I had unknowingly feared for years. Yet every time doubt rose in my throat, Damien would show up with that gentle voice, that practiced smile, that false concern that made me question my own instincts. He and Melissa began visiting more often, but their visits no longer felt like family. They felt like inspections. They wandered through our home with eyes that didn't look at memories. They measured them. Every piece of furniture Henry built, every photograph on the walls, every corner of the house we had loved for 40 years suddenly seemed like items on a list they were planning to claim long before we were gone. And though I tried to ignore it, I saw the way Melissa's eyes lingered on things, not with affection but calculation. One afternoon, as we sat in the living room, Melissa placed her hand on mine and said in her soft, sugary voice, "Mom, you know this house is too big for you and Dad now. You should think about selling it and moving somewhere smaller. Somewhere easier." Her tone pretended to care, but her eyes flickered with impatience. Damien nodded beside her, his jaw tight. "Mom, it's not safe for you anymore. Stairs, old wiring. Anything could happen." His voice had changed. The softness was gone. It felt like he was rehearsing a line he planned to use later. Something inside me twisted. I told them we weren't ready to leave the home where our entire lives were built. And in that moment I saw it, just for a second, an irritation in Damien's eyes so sharp and cold it stole my breath. It was like watching a mask slip, revealing something dark behind it. Something I had refused to see for years. That night, I asked Henry if he noticed anything strange. He brushed his teeth slowly, staring at his reflection with an expression I could not recognize. "Hilda, he cares about us. He just wants what's best." But his voice cracked, and beneath it, I heard something else, fear. A truth he wasn't ready to speak. As he climbed into bed, he looked at me the way a man looks when a nightmare from the past begins to bleed into the present. I didn't know it then, but Henry was carrying a truth heavy enough to break a man. A truth he had buried so deep inside himself that speaking it now felt like digging up a corpse he had tried to hide for 25 years. A few days later, Damien came again, with papers. "Power of attorney," he explained casually, as if he were offering us a gift. "Just in case something happens. We can handle things for you." His voice was calm, but his eyes didn't blink. Melissa busied herself in the kitchen, opening cabinets, examining drawers as if she already lived there. My chest tightened. I forced a smile, but inside me something screamed. That night, unable to sleep, I called my sister Harriet, the one who always saw through people. When I told her what Damien was asking for, she fell silent for a long moment. Then she said, "Hilda, something is wrong. Damien doesn't need your money. Why does he want control? What aren't you seeing?" Her words slammed into me like a cold wind. All the pieces I had ignored, every strange expression, every forced smile, every unsettling tone. They snapped together into a shape I didn't want to recognize. The next day, Damien showed up again, ready to discuss paperwork. I looked him straight in the eyes and asked, "Why do you need control over our finances? Your father and I are still capable." The change in his face was instant. Sharp, cold, irritated, like he had been waiting for resistance. "Mom," he said tightly, "we're trying to help you. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." The words were coated with false sweetness, but beneath them was steel. Dangerous steel. Melissa stepped in, placing a hand on his arm, smiling gently at me. "We just want to take care of you." But her smile faltered for half a second, and in that brief moment, I saw something terrifying. She wasn't trying to take care of us, she was trying to take control of us. That night, Henry and I had our first real argument in years. He accused me of being paranoid. I accused him of trusting too much. The kitchen, once warm and safe, suddenly felt like a room where lies were being peeled open. And then it happened, the moment that shattered the rest of my life. Henry put the plate he was washing down, dried his trembling hands, and told me to sit. His eyes were full of something I had never seen in him before. Guilt, regret, horror. He sat across from me, hands shaking, breath shallow, and whispered, "Hilda, there are things about Richard's death I never told you." The world tilted. My heart lurched. My fingers went cold. He continued slowly, like each word cut him from the inside. The night Richard died, Damien wasn't in his room studying. I saw him leave the house. Followed him. Something felt wrong. He swallowed hard. I heard them yelling by the gorge, screaming things at each other. Richard had found something. Something about the money. Damien was stealing from us, Hilda. Richard confronted him. The kitchen spun around me. Henry's voice cracked. They struggled. Then, Damien pushed him. Tears filled his eyes. It wasn't an accident. I saw it, Hilda. I saw our son push his brother. The floor disappeared beneath my feet. My breath vanished. The air turned thin and broken. Every memory of Damien's calmness at the funeral, every forced tear, every strange silence, suddenly made sense in the most horrifying way. But why didn't you tell me? I whispered, my voice barely a sound. Henry choked on his own guilt. Because he begged me. And because I couldn't lose both my sons in one night. I thought it was a mistake. I thought he'd change. But Damien didn't change. He learned. He learned how to lie, how to hide, how to manipulate, how to pretend. He learned how to become the perfect son, while stealing from us again and again. And now, decades later, he was planning his final step. Before I could even process the truth, the phone rang. Damien's voice floated through the receiver. Soft, cheerful, full of poison I hadn't recognized before. "Mom," he said sweetly. "Melissa and I were thinking, how about a trip next weekend? The mountains, family hike, fresh air, beautiful views." Henry's eyes met mine with terror. We both knew. He wasn't inviting us to celebrate anything. He was inviting us to die. And that was the moment everything inside me broke. The days leading up to that mountain trip felt like walking through a nightmare that refused to end. Every hour stretched thin with dread. Every breath felt heavier, and every sound in the house made my heart jump. Henry and I barely slept. We lay side by side in the dark, holding each other's hands, whispering plans we weren't sure we would live long enough to use. Even the walls seemed to listen, as if they knew the truth we had spent decades avoiding. Damien and Melissa visited more than usual that week. Too cheerful, too helpful, too attentive. They brought groceries we didn't ask for, suggestions we didn't need, and smiles that felt tighter each day. Melissa walked through our house as if she were already imagining it empty. Damien checked locks, stairs, cupboards, offering safety tips with a voice that sounded more like a countdown. And every time I looked at him, I saw not the little boy whose hand I once held, but the man who had pushed his brother to his death and felt nothing. On Wednesday, Melissa walked in with a shopping bag full of snacks for the family picnic, humming as if preparing for a joyful celebration. She took out cookies, fruit, energy bars, and a brand new camera. "I want to capture every moment," she said with a smile that stretched too far. I watched her gloves, her careful choice of clothing, the way she organized everything with unnerving precision, like someone preparing for a scene rather than a memory. Damien walked in behind her carrying a hiking backpack stuffed with safety equipment. Ropes, harnesses, lanterns, even a small shovel. A chill went down my spine. This wasn't a family outing. This was a staged accident waiting to happen. That night, when the house was quiet, Henry took out his phone and showed me how he had set it to record with a single press on the side button. "If we're going," he whispered, "we need proof. Something the police can't ignore. Something they can't twist." His voice trembled, but his eyes held a determination I had not seen in years. He knew, just as I did, that we might not survive, but the truth must. I leaned into him, letting my forehead rest on his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of sawdust that had comforted me for decades. "Henry," I whispered, "what if they find the phone?" He shook his head. "I'll hide it where no one will check. And if we die, at least the world will know why." Friday night felt like the last night of our lives. We ate dinner without speaking, pushing food around our plates, too numb to swallow. The house felt different, quieter, heavier, as if it understood the fear trembling beneath our skin. Before bed, Henry showed me a letter he had written to my sister Harriet, explaining everything. Richard's death, Damien's thefts, the pressure, the suspicion, the plan. He sealed it and hid it in the drawer where we kept our important documents. If we never returned, someone would eventually find it. Someone would know the truth. Saturday morning arrived with a cruelly beautiful sky. Clear, blue, mocking. Damien arrived early, whistling, cheerful, acting like a man who had planned a lovely family trip rather than an execution. "Ready for the adventure," he said brightly. His eyes gleaming with a confidence that made my stomach twist. Melissa stood beside him, shining like a woman at her wedding, except her happiness wasn't love. It was anticipation. She wore hiking gear, hair tied back neatly, eyes alert and calculating. The children stayed with a neighbor, as if our death required privacy. The car ride was silent torture. Melissa played cheerful music, humming along. Damien drove carefully, not missing a single sign or signal. He didn't want any accident to happen before the one he planned. Henry reached for my hand, pressing the side button on his phone without looking. The recording began. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure Damien could hear it. Yet he was too satisfied, too focused on the plan he believed was flawless. When we arrived at the trailhead, I felt a cold wave wash over me. The mountains stood tall and beautiful, yet to me they looked like open jaws waiting to swallow us whole. The air was crisp, the sound of the river nearby peaceful, an insult to the terror building inside me. Damien strapped on his backpack, checked his ropes again and smiled. "Perfect day for a hike," he said softly, almost to himself. Melissa adjusted her camera, already snapping pictures as if documenting the final chapter of our lives. We began the hike slowly. Melissa walked ahead, taking photos of trees, flowers and streams. Damien walked behind us, his eyes on our backs, watching every step we took. Every time I slowed down, he asked with fake concern, "Doing okay, Mom? Need help?" But his voice carried something that no longer sounded like love. It sounded like pressure, like patience slowly thinning, like someone waiting for the right moment. The trail grew steeper, the rocks looser. My legs began to ache, and Henry's breathing grew heavier. Damien and Melissa knew this would happen. They planned it. They wanted us tired, weak, vulnerable. After an hour, Melissa suddenly exclaimed with excitement, "Look at that cliff! The view must be incredible from there. Let's take pictures." My blood froze. I followed her gaze and saw the narrow path leading up to a rocky ledge, exposed, unstable, overlooking a deadly drop. Damien's eyes gleamed. "Yes," he said softly. "Perfect spot." We hesitated. He noticed. "Come on, Mom," he said, smiling too wide. "It'll take only a minute." Henry squeezed my hand gently. The phone in his pocket continued recording. We both knew we had no choice. If we refused now, they would find another place, another moment, another way. So we climbed. The higher we went, the more the ground crumbled beneath our feet. Melissa had already reached the top, camera ready. Damien helped push Henry and me up the final few feet. His hands firm, cold, controlling. Standing on that cliff, with the valley stretching endlessly below, I felt a fear so deep it hollowed my bones. "Stand together," Melissa said cheerfully. "I want a beautiful picture." We stepped closer to the edge. Damien moved behind us. The wind grew colder. My heart beat louder. Melissa lifted the camera. And I saw it, her eyes. The sweetness was gone. All that remained was hunger. "Smile," she said quietly. "This will be your last picture." Damien lunged, and the world disappeared beneath us. The moment Damien's hands struck our backs, the world shattered. There was no ground, no balance, no breath. Only the horrifying weightlessness of a body becoming a falling stone. The scream never left my throat. The wind tore it away before it could exist. The cliff vanished above us, the valley spun below us, and all I could think of was Richard. Falling. Alone, terrified, just as I was now. The impact was brutal. My body crashed against jagged rocks with a force that stole the world from me. Pain exploded through my bones. My shoulder twisted unnaturally, My arm felt useless, my ribs screamed with every shallow breath. For a moment, everything blurred into a silent white haze. I thought I was dead. I wished I was. Then, through the ringing in my ears, I heard a faint trembling voice. Henry's voice, gasping through pain and broken breath. "Hilda, don't move, play dead." His words weren't a plea. They were a warning. Command. Lifeline. Through the fog of agony, I forced my body into stillness. I didn't blink. I didn't breathe deeply. I didn't even swallow. I let my limbs slump where they fell, every muscle screaming for relief, my heart pounding so loudly I feared it might shake my chest visibly. 'Cause I could hear them. Damien and Melissa. They had survived the fall too. Their groans echoed a few feet away. Pained, angry, frustrated. Damien's voice cracked through the gorge, furious and panicked. "My leg. Damn it, Melissa. Are you okay?" "I think it's broken," she whimpered, but there was no innocence in her voice. Only rage. Calculation. "What about them?" The way she said them, as if we were objects, not parents, made my blood run cold. I heard Damien dragging himself across the rocks, crawling toward us. My lungs squeezed painfully as I forced myself to stay lifeless, even while every instinct begged to gasp. Stones shifted under his hands as he reached us. His breathing was shallow, but his voice was steady with certainty. "They're dead," he said after a long moment. "Both of them." Eyes open, no breathing. Melissa let out a shaky laugh, a sickening mixture of relief and cruelty. "Good. Then it worked. Everything worked." Their voices painted the truth sharper than knives. It had never been an accident. Never a moment of impulse. Never a misunderstanding. This was a plan. Meticulous. Cold. Rehearsed. A plan to kill us slowly, sweetly, with smiles, and inherit everything. Damien cursed under his breath. "We need to get out of here." Crawl toward the trail. We'll call for help from higher ground. If we tell the rescuers the same story, no one will suspect anything. Melissa exhaled sharply. "We'll be the only survivors of a tragic accident. For us, we lost your parents. Such a nightmare." Her voice was dripping with fake grief, so convincing it made my skin crawl. She had practiced this. She expected applause for her performance. Damien continued. "We'll say Dad slipped. He fell, grabbed Mom, and they both went over. We tried to stop them, but the rocks gave out under us. It's believable. We rehearsed it." They crawled away slowly, grunting in pain. Their voices grew faint, swallowed by the gorge walls. But their words stayed with me, carved into my soul like scars. Only when their footsteps faded into silence did Henry whisper again. So weak, so fragile I barely heard him. "Hilda, are you alive?" With every ounce of strength I had left, I moved my lips enough to whisper, "Yes." His relief came in a broken exhale that hurt more than the fall. "My leg, it's bad. Ribs broken." "What about you?" "My arm, shoulder, ribs," I breathed. "But I'm alive." Alive. Alive in a place where survival felt impossible. Blood trickled down my face, dripping into the dirt. The world spun around me. My fingers tingled with numbness. But knowing we had survived, at least for now, gave me a strength I didn't know I had. Henry's voice grew urgent despite his pain. "Hilda, listen." My phone, it recorded everything. A shove. Their voices. Their plan. Everything. Hope pierced through my fear, a small, trembling spark in the darkness. "But," he whispered, "we can't move. If they come back and find us alive, they'll finish it. We have to stay still until help comes." Fear tightened around my chest like a fist. We were alive but injured. Alive, but trapped at the bottom of a gorge. Alive, but waiting for killers to return with rescuers and play the role of grieving victims. Minutes turned into hours. Pain washed over me in waves. Deep, merciless, suffocating. My vision blurred. My fingers went cold. I thought of closing my eyes and never opening them again. But then I thought of Richard. and I knew I had to hold on. Eventually, distant voices echoed from above. The whirring of a helicopter filled the air. Rescue teams. Damien's voice floated down, full of practiced despair. Please. My parents, please help them. The hypocrisy burned my lungs. I remained still as rescuers rappelled down. One of them touched my neck, checking for a pulse. Faint pulse, he said. She's alive, but barely. Another checked Henry. He's critical. We need a stretcher. I fought every instinct to open my eyes, to ask for help, to gasp in relief. But I didn't. Henry didn't. We stayed limp, unmoving, because the truth had to reach safety before Damien could silence it again. They strapped us onto stretchers. I felt the tug of ropes lifting us slowly upward. Every movement sent agony surging through my bones, but I remained still, eyes closed, breathing shallow, pretending to be a woman at death's door, because that lie was the only thing keeping me alive. As we rose into the helicopter, I heard Melissa sobbing dramatically, the kind of sob a woman practices in front of a mirror. Oh God! Oh God, they didn't survive. What will we do? But beneath her tears, I heard something else in her voice. Satisfaction. As the helicopter doors closed, and the world lifted away under me, I realized something terrifying. Damien and Melissa truly believed we were dead. And because of that, we might finally have a chance to expose everything. The helicopter blades thundered above us as they lifted Henry and me away from the gorge, but inside that narrow metal chamber, everything felt eerily quiet. My body throbbed with a pain so deep it felt ancient, as if every bone had its own scream trapped inside it. I kept my eyes closed, chest rising in the weakest breaths I could manage, pretending to be closer to death than life. It was the hardest acting I had ever done, because every fiber of me wanted to reach out, to move, to say something. Anything, but even the slightest sign of life could destroy the only protection we had left. A paramedic leaned close to me, her voice steady and professional as she murmured, "Ma'am, hold on. Just hold on." The kindness in her tone felt like a knife in my heart, because she believed I was dying. Her compassion wasn't meant for a conscious woman. It was meant for a fading one. And I had to let her believe that. When we reached the hospital, chaos exploded around us. Bright lights, rushing footsteps, medical orders shouted in sharp voices. I felt hands moving over my body, checking wounds, adjusting bandages, inserting needles. I had to keep my breaths shallow, my limbs limp, my eyelids still. Again and again, I had to silence every instinct screaming inside me to sit up and beg for help. Nearby, I heard Henry's stretcher being wheeled away. His breathing sounded worse than mine, wet, strained, uneven. That terrified me more than anything else. What if he didn't survive the next hour? What if the truth died with him? As doctors worked on me, a nurse stood very close, monitoring my vitals. Her name tag read INS, and her quiet voice carried a sincerity that cut straight through the fog inside my mind. "Her pulse is unusual," she said softly. "Stronger than expected." My heart stopped for a moment. Had she realized? But the doctor dismissed it calmly, calling it a response to trauma. They had no idea that the real trauma was still walking free in the hospital hallways, disguised as a grieving son and daughter-in-law. After what felt like hours, the doctor stepped out, and the room fell silent. I forced myself to remain still, even as panic threatened to burst through my chest. Then I heard footsteps, slow, heavy, familiar. Damien. I felt the air shift as he approached my bed. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. His hand touched mine, warm, steady, sure of my death. He leaned close, his voice dripping false sorrow. "Mom, if you can hear me. Love you. I'm so sorry this happened." His words were poison wrapped in honey. Then he leaned closer, so close I felt his breath on my cheek, and whispered the sentence that froze my blood. "I hope you learned your lesson, Mom. You should never have asked about our finances. Some truths should stay buried, like Richard." Inside my unmoving body, something shattered. Not fear, not shock, something colder. something that felt like the death of whatever remained of my motherhood for him. I heard a small gasp. Nurse had heard it too. Damien straightened and walked away, completely unaware that his whisper had cracked open his entire lie. After they left, I felt someone approach again. The movement was small, hesitant. It was Nurse. She leaned down, whispering so quietly her voice trembled. "Ma'am, if you can hear me, move your finger." For a second my fear overtook me. If I moved and she didn't believe me, if she told the wrong person, if Damien returned, everything would be over. But then I remembered the recording in Henry's pocket, remembered the truth we carried like a burning weight. So slowly, painfully, I moved my index finger. He gasped. "Oh my God, you're conscious." Her breathing quickened. "If you are in danger from those people, move your finger 3 times. My heart hammered in my chest. I moved my finger once, twice, 3 times. She steadied herself, nodding, and whispered, "I believe you. I'm going to get the doctor and the police." "Stay still." Minutes stretched like hours, but finally she returned, with a doctor and 2 police officers. The doctor's voice softened as he leaned close. "Ma'am, you're safe now. If you can open your eyes, please do." For the first time since the fall, I allowed my eyelids to rise. Light flooded in, sharp and painful. The faces around me blurred, then slowly came into focus. Concerned eyes, uniforms, safety. And for the first time I breathed fully. One of the officers stepped forward. "I'm Detective Johnson. We understand you may be in danger. Can you tell us what happened?" My throat felt raw, but the truth crawled out of me in a whisper. My son and his wife pushed us. As they rushed to Henry's room, my heart raced. What if he hadn't survived? What if Damien had visited him too? But an eternity later, the detective returned with Henry's phone in hand. "Your husband is awake," he said gently, "and he gave us this." They played the recording. Damien's words echoed through the room. Melissa's voice confirmed every detail. The entire plan, the betrayal, the fall. The truth was finally alive outside of me. And upstairs in the waiting room, Damien and Melissa sat pretending to cry, believing we were dead, believing they had succeeded. But we were alive. We were speaking. We were finally being heard. And the world they built on lies was about to collapse. The moment the police confirmed they had Henry's recording, something inside me finally unclenched. A knot that had been tightening for 25 years slowly began to loosen. For the first time since the fall, I allowed myself to breathe without pretending. But fear still lingered at the edges of my mind, because I knew the most dangerous people in my life were sitting just 1 floor above us, believing they had already inherited our lives, our home, our future. They had no idea the truth was already unfolding beneath their feet like a silent earthquake. Detective Johnson moved quickly. Officers took positions around the hospital. Nurses avoided telling Damien and Melissa anything that could hint we were alive. It was a strange moment of suspended reality. Henry and I lying in hospital beds, battered and broken, while the world quietly rearranged itself around the truth. When Henry was rolled into my room for a few minutes, his face pale and bruised, he reached for my hand with trembling fingers. "We survived, Hilda," he whispered. "We survived long enough to speak." The weight of everything he had carried for decades, the guilt, the silence, the buried truth about Richard, settled into the room between us. But there was no anger left in me, only sorrow for the man who had tried to protect what little family he thought he had left. The arrest came faster than I expected. One moment the hospital floor was quiet, and the next, shouts, footsteps, commotion. Damien's voice exploded in disbelief. "No, this is a mistake. My parents are dead." His voice cracked with genuine panic, not because he cared about us, but because he realized his plan had failed. Melissa screamed next, high-pitched and frantic, as officers pulled her hands behind her back. It was him. It was all him. He planned everything. Her voice broke, desperation spilling out like poison. Damien fired back immediately. "She told me to do it. She said we had no choice." The performance they had rehearsed for our deaths crumbled instantly when faced with their own consequences. Through the small window in my room, I saw them being led away. Damien limping, rage burning through his eyes, Melissa crying dramatically like a woman who had just discovered her own reflection for the first time. And for a moment my heart twisted painfully. Not because I still loved him, but because I finally accepted something I had spent years refusing to believe. My son died the night he killed Richard. Everything after that had been a mask. Performance. A stranger wearing my child's face. The days that followed were long and exhausting. Reporters camped outside the hospital. Detectives came in and out. Lawyers visited with documents, recordings, timelines. Henry's phone became the backbone of the entire case. Every whispered plan, every intention, every incriminating word had been captured. For the first time in decades, the truth had a voice louder than Damien's lies. When Henry and I were finally strong enough to stand, the trial began. Walking into that courtroom was like stepping into a place where every ghost we had buried was waiting to be seen. Damien sat behind the defense table, his face hollow, his jaw clenched. Melissa avoided looking at him, desperate to save herself, even if it meant destroying him. Their lawyers spun stories of pressure, mental strain, financial desperation, but the evidence was too heavy, too clear, too damning. I took the witness stand with a shaking heart but a steady voice. I told the court everything. From the peaceful years of our family to the strange silence after Richard's death, to the lies, the suspicion, the will, the push, the fall. When I looked at Damien, really looked at him, I saw no remorse, no regret, only anger that his plan had failed. And in that moment my voice stopped trembling. "You are not my son," I said softly. "The boy I raised died a long time ago. I just didn't bury him until today." The jury deliberated for 3 days. 3 long, quiet days where Henry and I held hands and prayed that justice, slow as it may come, would finally arrive. When the verdict was read, guilty on all charges, I felt something inside me break open. Not joy, not triumph, something quieter. Release. A long, painful exhale from a wound that had been bleeding for 25 years. Life after the trial didn't return to normal. Couldn't. But it began to grow roots again, small and fragile. Our grandchildren were placed temporarily with social services, and when the court asked if we wanted to apply for custody, Henry and I didn't hesitate. They were innocent. They deserved to grow up in a home with truth. Not manipulation, not greed, not violence. The day they came to live with us, the house felt alive again. Different but hopeful. Every night when I tuck them into bed, I tell them stories about a man they never met, their Uncle Richard. I tell them about his kindness, his dreams, the laughter he carried everywhere he went. They listen with wide eyes, holding on to every word. And I promise them silently that our home will never again hold secrets that destroy. Now 1 year later I sit on the same porch Henry and I once used to dream about our future. The same porch where he first brought me wildflowers. The same porch where our life felt simple and safe. The mountains still stand in the distance, tall and indifferent, but I no longer fear them. Because the truth has finally stepped out from the shadows. And though the scars will never fully fade, they have taught me something powerful. When darkness grows inside the people you love, silence becomes its weapon. And speaking the truth, no matter how painful, becomes your only way home.